Resident Evil 9 just got some pretty crazy new DLC leaks, and honestly, if even half of this turns out to be true, Capcom fans are gonna lose their minds. Because according to Brand, new reports coming out of Japan, Ada Wong and Chris Redfield could both be returning as playable characters in the upcoming Resident Evil 9 DLC. Yeah, things are getting wild. Now, this leak supposedly comes from a Japanese insider who claims to have information about Capcom's full DLC roadmap for Resident Evil 9. And according to this report, the upcoming Requiem DLC is reportedly called Extraction, and it will feature Chris Redfield and Ada Wong as the two main playable protagonists. That alone already sounds massive. But apparently, that's not even the biggest part of the leak. According to the same source, Resident Evil 9 is actually planned to receive two separate story expansions in total. One DLC would reportedly focus on Alyssa and Leon Kennedy, while the second expansion would center around Chris Redfield and Ada Wong. So basically, Capcom could be preparing two major post-launch story DLCs instead of just one. Now honestly, that sounds almost too good to be true, and because of that, a lot of fans immediately started questioning whether this leak was actually legit. That's where well-known Resident Evil insider Dust Golem entered the conversation. Someone directly asked him about the rumored Extraction DLC featuring Chris and Ada, and his response was extremely blunt. He called it BS, literally just that. Afterward, Dusk Golem clarified his thoughts a little more and explained that while he does believe Ada Wong will eventually appear in future DLC content, he doesn't think this specific rumor about the Extraction expansion is accurate. So, according to him, the leak itself is probably fake or at least partially incorrect. But interestingly enough, he also shared his own expectations for Capcom's timeline moving forward, and honestly, it sounds pretty believable. According to Dusk Golem, the free Requiem content update is still expected to release very soon, possibly this month. We still don't know exactly what's included in that update, but recent developer interviews may have quietly hinted at something important. Apparently, Resident Evil producers told Japanese players to finish the game during Golden Week, which many fans believe was Capcom subtly teasing that new content is right around the corner. And if that's true, we could finally see the rumored mini-game release very soon. Maybe even sometime next week. Now that alone would already be exciting for fans, but it gets even bigger. Dusk Golem also believes that Capcom is preparing to officially announce the long-rumored Code Veronica remake during Summer Game Fest in June. And honestly, if that happens, it would be one of the biggest Resident Evil announcements in years. A lot of longtime fans have been begging Capcom to remake Code Veronica for a very long time now, especially after the success of the Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4 remakes. So the idea of finally seeing that game return with modern graphics, gameplay, and horror elements feels completely realistic at this point. Then after that, according to Dusk Golem's speculation, Capcom would officially reveal the Resident Evil 9 story expansion later this year. So right now, we basically have two completely different perspectives floating around online. One side claims there are two huge DLC expansions coming with characters like Leon, Ada, Chris, and Alyssa all returning in major roles. And the other side believes the leaks are exaggerated, but still thinks Ada Wong is definitely involved somewhere behind the scenes. Personally, I do think there's a very good chance we see Ada Wong in the DLC eventually. It honestly feels like Capcom has been building toward that for a while now. Ada is one of the most iconic characters in the entire franchise, and there are still so many unanswered questions surrounding her story, especially when it comes to Leon. Because fans have been speculating for years about Ada and Leon's relationship, and whether Capcom will ever fully explore what happened between them after all these years. And if Ada really does appear in the DLC, this could finally be the opportunity to dive deeper into that storyline. Now, as for Chris Redfield, I'm honestly not completely convinced. I feel like Capcom might actually be saving Chris for Resident Evil 10 instead, especially because Resident Evil 10 is rumored to be a massive crossover style game that could potentially bring together multiple legacy characters for one final story. And if that ends up being true, Chris would obviously play a major role there. As for Leon Kennedy, there's also a possibility that Resident Evil 9 or Resident Evil 10 could start setting up the end of his journey as a main protagonist. I mean, Leon has been carrying this franchise for decades at this point. From Resident Evil 2 to Resident Evil 4 and beyond, he's basically become the face of the series alongside Chris. But timeline-wise, Leon is getting older now. And honestly, Capcom may eventually want to give his character a more emotional conclusion instead of just throwing him into endless outbreaks forever. Maybe they finally let him settle down. Maybe they finally explore his personal life more seriously. Or maybe Capcom gives him one final legendary mission before passing the torch to a new generation of characters. At this point, anything feels possible. But overall, whether these leaks are real or fake, one thing is clear: Capcom definitely has huge plans for Resident Evil moving forward. Between the rumored DLC, the possible Code Veronica remake, and whatever Resident Evil 10 eventually becomes, the future of this franchise looks absolutely packed. But anyway, guys, those are just my thoughts on everything so far. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think these Resident Evil 9 DLC leaks are real? Would you want to play as Ada Wong and Chris Redfield again? And do you think Capcom is setting up Leon Kennedy's final story? Subscribe for more Resident Evil news and updates, and I'll see you guys in the next video.